Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever paused to truly consider the incredible, almost boundless curiosity young children possess?
Yeah.
How they naturally explore, ceaselessly ask why, and get completely absorbed in the magical world of play. It's a powerful, inherent drive.
It really is.
But what if that very play we sometimes dismiss as mere distraction is actually the secret superpower waiting to unlock deep, lasting love for science, technology, engineering, and math, what we affectionately call STEM, right in your future elementary classroom?
Yeah, and that's a powerful idea.
That's not just a hopeful idea, it's a profound shift in how we approach learning.
Indeed. And that profound shift is precisely what we're immersing ourselves in today. Our mission in this deep dive is to explore the truly fundamental connection between games and STEM learning. We're not just scratching the surface. We're drawing directly from cutting-edge research, specifically a fantastic in-depth chapter titled Game-Based Learning in Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics by Eric Klopfer and Meredith Thompson, found within the authoritative Handbook of Game-Based Learning.
Okay, top-tier sources then. So our ultimate goal here is to equip you, our listener, a future elementary educator, with a crystal clear understanding of what makes game-based learning so uniquely powerful for STEM.
Exactly.
We're going to peel back the layers on how it differs from simply slapping points or badges onto a worksheet, which, let's be honest, is a common misconception out there.
It really is.
And most importantly, we'll explore how these powerful concepts can truly come alive for your elementary students, fostering not just deep knowledge, but a genuine lifelong love for STEM right from those formative early years.
Yeah.
Consider this your shortcut to being genuinely well-informed on a topic that's not just trending, but, fundamentally reshaping education. We're diving into the essential why and how behind these transformative experiences.
Let's get into it.
So when we talk about STEM in the context of elementary students, it feels like it encompasses so much more than just a list of separate subjects, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It's about building a foundational understanding that, for some, might even inspire future pathways, but for all, it builds something perhaps even more critical.
You've hit on a crucial point there. When we refer to STEM, we're certainly talking about the disciplines of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But the term itself often carries dual, sometimes, competing goals.
Okay.
On one hand, there's the focus on workforce development, preparing individuals for future STEM careers, which absolutely needs to start with foundational experiences right in school.
Right, building that pipeline.
Exactly. This means building specific skills and cultivating interest from the ground up, identifying and nurturing talent early on.
Makes sense.
However, there's an equally, if not more, important goal for elementary education, and that's STEM literacy for all citizens.
Ah, okay. Tell me more about that.
Well, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, way back in 1994, articulated this vision beautifully. They emphasized that we need to ensure everyone has the fundamental skills and understanding to participate effectively as informed decision makers in a democratic society.
That sounds really broad but vital.
It is. Think about it. Everything from climate change discussions to public health crises, understanding the latest tech innovations, even just evaluating data you see in the news.
Right, everyday stuff.
Exactly. It all requires a baseline level of STEM literacy. So for our youngest learners, it's about building that fundamental understanding for all students, regardless of whether they ultimately pursue a STEM career.
So it's empowering them, really.
Precisely. It empowers them to navigate, critically evaluate, and contribute meaningfully to our increasingly complex, technology-driven world.
That distinction really sharpens the focus for elementary teachers, doesn't it? It shifts the goal from merely identifying future engineers at age 6.
Right, which is unrealistic anyway.
Just cultivating curiosity and capability universally right from the start. Our sources highlight that optimal STEM education should be real-world, relevant, and relational. Let's illuminate what each of those means, because they're powerful benchmarks.
Good idea.
Real world means it's situated in authentic, engaging contexts, often through problem-based or inquiry-based learning. That's not just abstract concepts on a whiteboard.
Something tangible.
Exactly. Something children can touch, build, or investigate. Then, relevant implies a clear link to how STEM activities genuinely help people and communities, going beyond just developing new technologies for their own sake.
So the why matters.
Yeah.
The human connection.
Precisely, the societal impact. And finally, relational means individuals can truly envision themselves doing STEM and feel like they have the agency to engage with it. That boosts their confidence and sense of belonging immensely.
Absolutely. And that relational aspect, combined with early exposure in elementary school, is incredibly important for challenging existing stereotypes about who can do science or math.
Yeah, those stereotypes are pervasive.
They really are. We all know the narratives that can unintentionally creep in. Math is for boys, or science is too hard. Early, positive, and engaging experiences directly challenge these notions.
So it builds confidence early.
Yes, it builds what psychologists call self-efficacy, a child's belief in their own ability to succeed from a very young age. And this is where games can genuinely shine.
Okay, how so?
They provide that initial spark, that thrilling sense of achievement, and a safe, iterative space for exploration that encourages children to see themselves as capable STEM thinkers, regardless of their background.
Like a low-stakes entry point.
Exactly. A place where mistakes aren't failures, they're just steps toward mastery. It's about creating an inviting entry into these fields.
As someone thinking about an elementary classroom, this next point really makes you consider how we design learning, because when we talk about educational games in this context, these aren't just any games, are they?
No, definitely not.
There's a very specific, almost magical kind of design at play that makes them so uniquely effective for STEM.
That's spot on. Thoughtfully designed educational games for STEM don't just entertain. Their core purpose is to help students learn specific STEM concepts, practice essential skills, and deeply refine their problem-solving and computational thinking.
So learning is the main goal.
Absolutely. They achieve this by providing what our sources describe as scaffolded authentic context and inquiry-driven investigations. Imagine, you're not just handed a fact. You're given a mystery to solve, and the game provides just enough support to guide you.
Like training wheels.
Sort of, yeah. But not so much that it gives away the answer. The very best educational games are designed to intrinsically engage learners, offer dynamic, ongoing feedback as they play, and crucially, adapt to the player's evolving ability.
Like a good teacher would.
Exactly like a master teacher differentiating instruction. James Paul Gee, a prominent scholar in this area, highlights that these games give players a specific purpose and rationale to collect data, solve problems, find patterns, and design solutions.
So they answer the "why are we learning this?" question inherently.
Precisely. Students are far less likely to ask that because the why is woven directly into the game's captivating narrative and its compelling challenges. The learning isn't an add-on, it's the very fabric of the game itself.
That's such a powerful design philosophy for elementary classrooms. Think about a student who's struggling with basic arithmetic or even early geometry concepts. Instead of just a worksheet full of isolated problems, imagine a game where they're tasked with building a thriving virtual city.
Okay, I can picture that.
To construct new buildings, they need to calculate precise angles for support beams or manage a budget by accurately adding and subtracting resources. Or perhaps they need to figure out the exact number of virtual coins they've earned to buy supplies for their virtual pet using multiplication.
So the math has a clear purpose in the game.
Exactly. That immediate, clear purpose tied to a goal they genuinely care about within the game world is incredibly motivating for young learners. It transforms abstract numbers and shapes into meaningful actions, giving them a tangible reason to master those underlying STEM concepts.
So they're not just doing math, they're using math.
Precisely. Using it to achieve something exciting. Now, let's unpack a really common and often confusing distinction. It's so easy to mistake simply putting a leaderboard or a point system on a task for true game-based learning.
Oh yeah, the gamification issue.
Exactly. But our sources make a critically important distinction here, and it's one you'll absolutely need to understand as you design learning experiences for your future students.
This is perhaps the most vital takeaway for anyone considering game-based learning. For the purposes of this deep dive, we define a true STEM game as one where the game design and the educational content are intricately linked.
Okay, intricately linked. How?
The actions of the player are directly STEM-related, and the primary goal of the game is to help students deeply learn about STEM concepts and develop core STEM skills. A powerful meta-analysis by Clark, Tanner Smith, and Killingsworth back in 2014 concluded that design, rather than medium alone, predicts learning outcomes.
So it's not just about using a computer or tablet.
Not at all. It's about how that screen experience is meticulously designed to facilitate genuine learning. Now, This is where many popular educational games inadvertently fall into the category of gamification.
Right. Explain that trap.
Gamification is when you take game mechanics like points, badges, or leaderboards and apply them to otherwise unrelated or existing tasks, essentially adding a layer of superficial fun.
Got it. Like points for doing homework.
Exactly. Or think about a classic example like Math Blaster. Players might see a math problem like 6 plus 2 and then have to shoot the number 8 out of the sky.
I remember that one.
Right. While this can provide drill and practice and might boost motivation for some, it's not what we're defining as a true STEM game for our purposes here.
Why not? What's the key difference?
Because the core content, those math problems, could easily be substituted with vocabulary words, history facts, or anything else. And the player's actions, the shooting, aren't directly related to the learning of the mathematical concept itself.
Ah, I see. The shooting doesn't help you understand addition.
Exactly. The game mechanics are extrinsic motivators, layered on top. True game-based learning, as our sources explain, employs narrative, conflict, and core mechanics that intrinsically motivate learning and practice because the learning is the game.
So the doing of the game is the doing of the learning.
Spot on. They are fused.
For an elementary teacher, this isn't just a nuance, it's the fundamental design choice that determines whether a child is merely distracted by fun or truly transformed by learning.
Absolutely crucial.
The core insight here, true STEM games don't add learning to play. They fuse it, making the act of playing inseparable from the act of understanding. So if you're just adding stars or virtual coins to a spelling test, that's pure gamification.
Right. Might work short-term, but it's not deep learning.
A true STEM game, by our definition, would immerse the child in a narrative where spelling words is integral to solving a scientific mystery. Maybe they need to spell chemical names correctly to decode encrypted messages about identifying elements for a virtual experiment.
Okay, I see the connection there.
Or spell out scientific terms to unlock the next crucial stage of a biology experiment. The doing of the spelling is interwoven with the doing of the science. That's the critical difference. And it's about making the learning purpose-driven from within the game's logic.
Building on that, it's also important to clarify two more categories that, while undeniably STEM-related and valuable, are not the primary focus of this deep dive because their main goal isn't direct learning outcomes in quite the same way.
Okay, what are those?
The first are citizen science games. These are fantastic initiatives that use game mechanics to crowdsource data collection and analysis for real-world scientific research.
Like SETI at home back in the day. Or Fold It.
Exactly like Fold It.
Yeah.
Players manipulate complex computer models of proteins, adhering to scientific rules, to help solve real, open scientific problems like predicting protein structures. It's incredibly successful for generating real data and computation that helps actual researchers.
But the goal isn't primarily teaching the players about proteins.
Right. While some players may learn something through exposure, the primary focus isn't systematic edification about the topic. It's about leveraging collective intelligence to advance research. Learning is a potential side effect, not the main design goal.
Got it. And the second category?
The second category involves simulations and modeling platforms when used alone. These are undeniably powerful tools for examining forces, processes, and natural phenomena. Think of widely used tools like Model It, Star Logo, the popular FET simulation.
Oh yeah, FET is great.
Fantastic resource. Or WebMo for molecular modeling. They allow students to interact with scientific models, manipulate variables, and see how systems behave under different conditions.
Like a virtual science lab sandbox.
Exactly. But our sources emphasize that these platforms typically lack a narrative theme, a personal perspective, or the level of goal-directed feedback that's regularly incorporated into a game.
So they're more open-ended.
Often, yes. While invaluable for exploration, they're often more like a sandbox. Games, crucially, augment these simulations by providing additional scaffolding, a compelling context, and immediate relevance, embedding them within a larger inquiry context with clear, motivating goals.
So the game adds the structure and purpose around the simulation.
Precisely. They turn a tool into an experience.
What's fascinating here is that this isn't about dismissing these tools or saying they aren't incredibly valuable. PET simulations, for instance, are absolutely fantastic for letting children experiment with forces in a virtual environment,
Definitely.
like pushing blocks with different amounts of friction. But what our sources are pointing out is that a true STEM game builds on top of them, creating a richer, more guided, and deeply motivating learning experience.
Right. It's about layering.
Imagine a game built around that same force simulation that asks students to use those forces to save a trapped character from a crumbling bridge, or design a functioning machine to launch a satellite. This provides a narrative and a compelling purpose that significantly enhances both engagement and, crucially, the transfer of that learned knowledge.
It's about layering meaning and mission onto the interaction.
Absolutely.
Now let's transition into how games actually support STEM learning by fostering both content understanding and skill development.
Okay.
Games truly excel at engaging students in the core conceptual ideas of STEM fields and provide a dynamic, active space for them to enact content, skills, and practices, not just passively absorb them.
Active learning them.
Very much so. When it comes to content understanding, games are revolutionary because they allow students to explore locations that would otherwise be unreachable or phenomena that are invisible to the naked eye.
Like going inside a cell. Or to Mars.
Exactly. Imagine exploring the vastness of outer space, trekking through the interior of a volcano, or navigating the intricate pathways inside a microscopic cell or atom. They can grapple with abstract concepts made tangible.
Such as?
Like using virtual reality games to understand relative motion and momentum in physics by piloting a spacecraft, or exploring complex three-dimensional geometric objects in mathematics by building and manipulating them in a highly interactive environment. This directly overcomes the limitations of traditional static diagrams or purely descriptive textbook passages.
Yeah, you can see how that would be much more engaging for kids. For an elementary classroom, the content aspect of game-based learning is nothing short of revolutionary. Imagine a science game where students can literally shrink down to the size of a molecule
Wow.
and navigate the inside of a plant cell, identifying organelles like the nucleus or chloroplasts, and actively understanding the process of photosynthesis by interacting with its components rather than just labeling a diagram in a textbook.
That visual interactive element makes a huge difference.
Or picture them exploring the entire solar system and understanding planetary motion by piloting a virtual spaceship, experiencing the gravitational pull and seeing orbital mechanics in action. These experiences transform abstract scientific concepts into tangible, memorable, and deeply immersive journeys for young children.
Helping them build those mental models.
Precisely. Robust mental models.
And beyond just absorbing content, games are exceptionally powerful for developing skills. They enable what the research calls preparation for future learning.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means helping students learn and practice basic skills and foundational knowledge in a meaningful context that will be profoundly useful later on. For instance, think of a game like Lure of the Labyrinth. While it's designed for middle schoolers, it perfectly illustrates this.
How does it work?
It introduces concepts like finding unknown quantities and exploring ratios and proportions, all while the player is busy managing a monster cafeteria and solving narrative-driven puzzles.
So the math is embedded in the story.
Exactly. This is a far cry from a gamified worksheet. The mathematical reasoning is intrinsically tied to progressing through the game. The skill acquisition isn't incidental, it's central to the challenge.
That distinction between skill acquisition as a means to an end versus rote drill and practice is incredibly important for early math. For elementary math skills, imagine a game that challenges students to build increasingly complex structures, perhaps bridges or tall towers, using various geometric shapes.
Like virtual Legos with physics.
Kind of. To succeed, they have to understand properties like the number of sides, angles, and how different shapes fit together to create stability. They learn this not through memorization, but through interactive play. They place a shape, and if it's unstable, the virtual structure might wobble or collapse.
Giving them immediate feedback.
Exactly. This hands-on conceptual learning, which involves constant problem-solving and spatial reasoning, actively prepares them for more formal geometry and engineering concepts later on, all while feeling like an exciting construction project.
That makes a lot of sense. It's learning through consequence.
This raises an important question for elementary educators. How do games move beyond just teaching facts and actually help students think like scientists or engineers?
The process, not just the product.
Right. It's about developing those critical inquiry and problem-solving practices, the very mindset of STEM.
That's indeed a core strength and unique affordance of well-designed STEM games. They have immense potential to engage students directly in authentic STEM practices, mirroring the iterative probe, hypothesize, reprobe, rethink process.
The scientific method, essentially.
In a very active, dynamic way, yes.
Yeah.
That process actual scientists and engineers engage in every day. Games are exceptionally useful in demonstrating what we call cross-cutting concepts.
Okay, cross-cutting concepts, like
Think of these as the fundamental thinking lenses that scientists and engineers use, regardless of their specific field. These include ideas like cause and effect, if I do this, what happens, patterns, what repeats or changes predictably, systems, how do all these parts work together, understanding scale and proportion, and the concepts of stability and change.
So big ideas that apply across different STEM fields.
Exactly. Games naturally embed these lenses into their challenges, so kids aren't just memorizing isolated facts. They're developing a holistic scientific and engineering mindset.
How do game narratives fit in?
Game narratives, in particular, provide fantastic immersive context for introducing basic STEM concepts and then gradually developing understanding of more complex topics. This aligns beautifully with educational frameworks like the Next Generation Science Standards, NGSS.
Which emphasize practices and concepts, right?
Precisely. Not just content, but disciplinary core ideas, science and engineering practices, and those cross-cutting concepts. Similarly, games could be incredibly powerful tools for enacting the common core standards for mathematical practice.
Like problem solving and modeling.
Exactly. Fostering high-level skills such as persistence in problem solving, making mathematical models of real-world situations, engaging in abstract reasoning, and constructing viable arguments. These are all critical thinking skills that games can make accessible and engaging even for young learners through playful interaction.
So, for an elementary classroom, imagine a game that challenges students to become weather scientists.
Okay.
In a simulated environment, perhaps one that mimics their own schoolyard, they collect virtual data, temperature, wind speed, cloud types, maybe even virtual precipitation.
Like being a field scientist.
Right. They then use that data to make predictions about the next day's weather, just like a real meteorologist. The game provides immediate feedback on whether their hypotheses were correct, and crucially, why or why not.
Learning from the outcomes.
Exactly. This isn't just about learning weather facts. It's about learning the entire process of scientific inquiry itself. Observing, collecting data, hypothesizing, testing, and refining understanding of patterns and cause and effect relationships firsthand. It's doing science in a meaningful, iterative, and incredibly playful way.
Or maybe like being bridge engineers.
Yeah. Designing structures, where the game calculates the structural integrity based on their understanding of forces. They learn by doing, failing, and iterating, just like real engineers.
That iterative process is so key.
Okay, so our sources highlight 3 primary mechanisms through which STEM games deeply connect activity and learning objectives. This is really about leveraging what's truly unique about games to create profound learning experiences.
Like these are the big levers.
These 3 core mechanisms are systems, scale, and roles.
That's absolutely right. These are 3 predominant, powerful themes you'll find in the most effective STEM game designs. Let's start with systems.
Okay, systems. What does that mean in a game context?
STEM games are often built upon robust simulations of real-world or underlying abstract systems, which are governed by a coherent set of rules. Think about how gravity works, or how a simple machine operates, or even the flow of traffic in a city.
So the game mimics a system with rules.
Exactly. And while simulations alone are powerful tools, games augment them by providing a compelling narrative, clear goals, and crucial immediate feedback, making the exploration of these systems more structured, relevant, and engaging for learners.
Give me an example.
A fantastic example in physical sciences is the game Surge, where players navigate a spaceship by precisely manipulating forces and speeds. They are directly applying Newton's laws of mechanics within a dynamic system.
So their actions have clear physical consequences in the game.
Precisely. Predictable, physics-based consequences. In life sciences, the Ubiki series includes beetle breeders, where students breed exotic beetles with specific characteristics. To succeed, they must apply Mendelian genetics models, interacting directly with the system of genetic inheritance.
Seeing genetics in action.
Exactly. Seeing the outcomes of their choices. And in mathematics, the hugely successful Dragonbox algebra series models algebraic systems interactively. Students balance equations by manipulating both sides of a system, seeing the abstract rules of algebra come alive.
I've heard great things about Dragonbox.
Yeah, it's been rigorously linked to improved reasoning, problem solving, and even more positive attitudes toward algebra for young learners.
Dragonbox algebra is indeed a fantastic elementary example that many teachers are already exploring and having great success with. To bring the idea of systems even more vividly to life for our elementary educators, imagine a game where students design a simple machine.
Like a pulley.
Exactly, like a pulley system, to lift a heavy virtual object. The game allows them to experiment by changing one component, say, the the length of the rope, the number of pulleys, or the weight being lifted, and they immediately see how that specific change affects the entire system's efficiency in lifting the object.
So they're tinkering with the system and seeing the results.
Precisely. They are directly interacting with a system of forces and simple machines, learning about cause and effect, interconnectedness, and optimization through playful, iterative experimentation. The system responds logically to their choices, reinforcing the underlying physics.
Makes sense. Okay, next up is scale.
Scale, like big and small.
Exactly. This is where games provide an incredibly powerful means for experiencing phenomena at vastly different scales, which often pose significant conceptual difficulties for students. Our human brains are hardwired to understand the world at our own immediate macroscopic scale.
Right. It's hard to picture an atom or a galaxy.
It really is. It's challenging for us to intuitively grasp something as tiny as a virus, or as vast as a galaxy, or as slow as geological time or evolution. But games can literally place players right within these foreign scales, making them comprehensible.
How do they do that? Examples.
For a small spatial scale example, consider the game Virulent. It places players at the scale of a virus trying to inject itself into a host cell. Players must literally think like a virus to navigate the cellular environment and overcome its defenses.
Wow, that's immersive.
It is. And studies show that students who played Virulent developed significantly more sophisticated mental models of changes over time within biological systems compared to those who used traditional text and diagrams.
Interesting. What about large scale?
For large spatial scales, Planet Mechanic challenges players to design planets and entire solar systems, ensuring they fulfill various criteria, which helps them deeply understand the relationships between moons, planets, and stars.
So they're building solar systems. Cool.
Yeah. And when it comes to temporal scale experiencing processes that unfold over very, very long periods, we have games like Radix Endeavor.
You mentioned that one before. How does it handle time?
It's a massively multiplayer online game where players act as scientists. In one quest, they explore differences in bird traits, collecting micro-level data on beaks. Then, they use an EvoGlobe tool within the game to run macro-level simulations over immense periods, seeing how beak shapes evolve due to selective pressures.
So they see evolution sped up dramatically.
Exactly. It's a brilliant way to make evolution a concept that's often hard to grasp due to its immense time scale, tangible and observable.
That sounds powerful. But you mentioned a caveat.
Yes, a crucial caveat. Games must reinforce accurate ideas about STEM domains and avoid reinforcing misconceptions, especially about agency. For example, the popular game Spore faced criticism for making evolution seem like a direct, player-controlled design process.
Instead of natural selection.
Right, rather than the nuanced, undirected process of natural selection. Game designers have a significant responsibility here to ensure scientific accuracy.
That's a really important point. So for elementary students, Planet Mechanics sounds ideal for large scales.
Definitely. Visualizing and interacting with celestial scales.
And for small scale, maybe a game letting them zoom in on a drop of pond water to identify microscopic organisms.
Perfect example. Understanding biodiversity they can't normally see.
And for temporal scales, maybe speeding up the life cycle of a plant, seed to flower to fruit in minutes.
Exactly. Transforming these complex, time-dependent concepts into digestible, observable, and deeply engaging experiences for young minds. Okay, the third mechanism, roles.
Roles, like acting.
Sort of. Games can exceptionally place players in specific roles, often mirroring the disciplinary practices of real-world STEM professionals. This actively requires players to understand, internalize, and apply the capabilities and thinking patterns relevant to that role.
Like being a scientist or an engineer in the game.
Precisely. Think of traditional role-playing games where different characters have different skills they combine to overcome a challenge. The same principle applies here for STEM learning.
Can you give some examples?
The game Radix Endeavor, which we just mentioned, was built extensively on this role-playing principle. Players literally took on the roles of scientists, biologists, mathematicians in a Renaissance-like era, acquiring and applying knowledge within complex quests. Okay, what else? Another powerful example is Quest Atlantis and its successor, Quest Atlantis Remixed. These were immersive 3D virtual worlds where players learned science practices and were encouraged to think about applying them outside the game.
How did that work?
In one popular unit, the Taiga unit, players had to figure out why fish were dying off in a virtual ecosystem, using scientific measurements, analyzing environmental data, and engaging in logical reasoning.
Effectively stepping into the shoes of an environmental scientist.
Exactly. And this kind of role-playing doesn't even have to be entirely on screen. In environmental detectives, for instance, Students use mobile handheld devices in a real physical location, like their schoolyard.
Augmented reality?
Yes. To solve a simulated environmental crisis, they played various roles, collecting virtual water or air quality data triggered by their actual location, performing analyses, or implementing remediation strategies.
Yeah.
It blurred the lines between game and reality.
That sounds incredibly engaging.
It really was. And in an alternate reality game called Vanished, players weren't simply assigned roles, but chose activities like data collection or theory analysis in a real-world mystery, embodying practices reinforced by discussions with practicing scientists. This fostered significant transfer of knowledge and identity beyond the game itself.
Environmental detectives provide such a fantastic, tangible model for an elementary classroom. Imagine creating a classroom pollution patrol or ecosystem engineers game,
I like that.
where students, in small collaborative groups, take on specific roles. Maybe one is the data collector, observing changes in a simulated classroom garden, another the hypothesizer, proposing reasons for problems, and a third, the solution designer, coming up with ways to make the garden healthy again.
They're collaborating using different skills.
Exactly. They'd investigate a simulated environmental problem, collect observations, analyze virtual clues, and then propose solutions. This gives them immense agency, a profound sense of purpose, and directly involves them in the scientific and engineering practices.
Problem solving, evidence gathering, designing solutions.
Right. All within a playful, collaborative, and deeply meaningful context. They truly become the scientist or engineer.
That's powerful. It builds identity.
That's a truly compelling argument for custom-designed games. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, especially for aspiring elementary teachers, a practical question emerges. What about all those commercial games kids already know and love, like Minecraft or Angry Birds?
Ah, yes, the COTs games.
Can teachers really leverage those in the classroom for STEM learning? Or does it always have to be specialized, custom-designed educational software?
That's a great and incredibly practical question. And the answer is yes, absolutely. Our sources clearly demonstrate that teachers have indeed effectively repurposed commercial off-the-shelf COT games for STEM learning for many years. You don't always need bespoke software.
So which ones work well?
The sim genre of games, like SimCity Zoo Tycoon and Roller Coaster Tycoon, are particularly well suited for this.
Why them specifically?
Because they have robust underlying simulations that generate a significant amount of quantitative data and graphical representations. These outputs can then form the basis of real, rigorous classroom analyses.
So students can analyze the data the game produces.
Exactly. They can manage a city's budget, analyze population growth and its impact on resources, or optimize roller coaster designs based on physics principles, all within the game's dynamic environment.
What about more modern games?
More recently, physics-based games like Angry Birds and mathematics, rich games like Minecraft have also been widely and successfully adapted for classroom use.
We kids love those.
Absolutely. And teachers frequently cite the increased student investment and intrinsic motivation that comes from using data that the students themselves generated within these familiar games.
Even games like World of Warcraft.
Believe it or not, yes. Fascinating research on World of Warcraft has shown players regularly engaging in a suite of scientific practices, sophisticated modeling, data analysis, argumentation, not just in the game, but on discussion boards and wikis outside of it, as they collectively optimize strategies and build knowledge about complex game mechanics.
Wow, so the teacher's role is key in framing it.
Absolutely. The challenge for the teacher is identifying the underlying STEM principles and crafting the right prompts and activities to make the learning explicit.
Minecraft is a prime example that's already incredibly popular with elementary students. So many teachers are already meeting kids where their interest is.
It's a fantastic resource.
Teachers are using it for everything from geometry, building complex structures, learning about volume, surface area, spatial reasoning, to resource management, integrating math, and even basic economics.
Mining and crafting.
Right. You can even use it to create virtual ecosystems and study how different elements interact. And Angry Birds, as deceptively simple as it seems, can illustrate basic physics concepts like trajectories, force, and angles in a super engaging way.
The play value is built in.
Exactly. The teacher's role becomes the expert guide, framing the gameplay as a STEM investigation. It's about asking what if and why.
Building on the idea of leveraging existing games, we also see a significant category of modified Keotex games.
Modified? How so?
These are versions of commercial games that have been specifically redesigned or adapted, often by educational researchers or developers, to focus on explicit STEM learning outcomes.
Okay, like educational versions.
Pretty much. A well-known example is SimCity EDU, a version of SimCity licensed by EA and developed by GlassLab. This version emphasized systems thinking and came with a dedicated curriculum and assessment tools embedded directly into the game.
So it had learning supports built in.
Exactly. Similarly, there have been modified versions of games like Newton's Playground that take on crayon physics, and even Plants vs. Zombies, which were adapted to study science-related practices and incorporate stealth assessment.
Stealth assessment, what's that?
It's where learning and understanding are assessed seamlessly as the student plays, rather than through traditional separate tests. The game itself collects the data on what the student knows and can do based on their actions and choices.
That sounds really efficient.
It can be.
For an elementary teacher, these modified versions often provide huge benefits because they come with built-in curricula, clearer learning objectives, and sometimes even teacher dashboards for tracking progress.
Makes integration easier.
Definitely. It makes them much easier to integrate effectively into the classroom than trying to adapt a complex commercial game from scratch. They really bridge that gap between pure entertainment and structured educational content.
Giving teachers a solid framework.
Right. Minimizing the planning burden while maximizing the learning impact. They take the guesswork out of turning play into profound learning.
Makes a lot of sense.
This raises an important question for you as an elementary education major. It's not just the games work, but how they work, right?
Understanding the theory behind it, yes.
Understanding the underlying learning theories helps you choose and design truly effective learning experiences, moving beyond just intuition.
Exactly. When we explore the profound implications of educational games, especially for STEM learning, it's absolutely crucial to look at them through the lenses of cognitive, affective, and sociocultural theories.
Okay, which theories are most relevant here?
The overarching framework our sources emphasize, which elegantly ties many of these together, is situated learning theory.
Situated learning. Tell me about that.
This theory, championed by scholars like Jean Lave and Etienne Wenger, posits that learning is most effective and truly internalized when it's deeply embedded within authentic activities, meaningful contexts, and relevant social cultures.
Learning by doing in a real context.
Essentially, yes. And games, by their very nature, excel at this. They seamlessly place learners in dynamic environments where they actively construct new knowledge, are intrinsically motivated to practice skills, and are introduced to a community of practice, even if that community is virtual.
So the game creates the community.
In a way, yes. Think of the game environment as a dynamic proxy for this community. It provides not just context, but also implicit guidelines for quality work within the game, and often other players or non-player characters to interact with and learn from.
Like learning the rules and norms of a scientific field.
Exactly. In this sense, the game itself can serve the role of a master teacher, simulating what Brown, Collins, and Duguid call a cognitive apprenticeship.
Cognitive apprenticeship, like learning a trade from a master but for thinking.
Precisely. Players learn not just isolated facts, but also the tacit assumptions scientists make, or how engineers systematically design things, all through guided, iterative practice. This aligns perfectly with Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, ZPD.
The sweet spot for learning.
Right. Or G's regime of competence. Think about it.
Right.
A well-designed game doesn't just offer static scaffolding. It dynamically adapts its challenges, hints, and feedback based on a player's real-time performance.
So it adjusts the difficulty.
Constantly. It pushes them just beyond their current comfort zone, their ZPD, providing exactly the right amount of support to help them achieve tasks they couldn't quite manage alone. As they master a concept, that support subtly fades, allowing them to internalize the new skills.
That sounds incredibly personalized.
It is. That personalized, immediate adaptation is incredibly powerful.
So for an elementary classroom, you can really think of it like this. Imagine a young student learning to build increasingly complex structures with virtual blocks in a game like Dragon Box Elements.
Okay.
The game could virtually provide them with an apprenticeship to a master builder character, guiding them through increasingly complex structures, introducing new tools and concepts as they progress.
So they feel guided, not just thrown in.
Right. This gives them a tangible sense of belonging to a building community, and the game gradually removes hints or supports as they master concepts like balance, stability, and spatial reasoning. The learning is happening by doing within a deeply meaningful, goal-oriented context.
And feeling like part of something.
Yeah. Exactly. They're not just playing, they're apprenticing.
Okay. Besides situated learning, what else?
Then we have cognitive science, which offers vital insights into how the brain processes information and learns best. Game design can be meticulously optimized by understanding principles like cognitive load theory.
Cognitive load. That's about not overwhelming the brain.
Exactly, developed by John Sweller. This theory suggests that instructional design should consider the brain's limited capacity to process new information. Games can significantly reduce cognitive load by segmenting complex information into smaller, manageable pieces.
Breaking it down.
Right, eliminating redundancy and synchronizing visual and auditory elements. Think of a tutorial that shows you how to do something while telling you simultaneously that multimedia principle is inherently optimized in well-designed games, making it easier for learners to absorb complex STEM concepts.
That makes sense. What other cognitive principles apply? Beyond just managing cognitive load, cognitive science provides several powerful research-backed recommendations that games inherently align with, almost by accident of their design.
Oh, like what?
One is interleaving. Instead of blocking similar problem types together, like 20 addition problems followed by 20 subtraction problems, mixing different problem types early in the learning process promotes deeper, more flexible understanding.
So mixing things up.
Yes, for deeper learning. Games, by their very nature, often provide varied challenges that force players to select and apply different strategies or recall different concepts on the fly.
Okay, interleaving. What else?
Another principle is spaced iterative learning. Spacing learning episodes over time, rather than cramming them into short, intense bursts, significantly improved long-term retention.
Like studying over weeks instead of cramming the night before.
Exactly. Games naturally encourage repeated play over time, allowing players to revisit concepts in new contexts and at increasing levels of complexity without it feeling like a chore.
And feedback.
Absolutely critical. Ongoing feedback is essential for sustained motivation and for learners to take ownership of their progress, ultimately becoming self-regulated learners.
And games give instant feedback.
They inherently provide immediate, clear, and actionable feedback. Right away if your action was correct or incorrect, if your solution worked, or if your virtual structure collapsed. This instant feedback is also incredibly valuable for teachers.
How so?
Allowing them to continuously monitor student progress, identify misconceptions in real time, and provide targeted support before bad habits solidify. This constant loop of action feedback adjustment is a cornerstone of learning.
This is super practical for you as an elementary educator planning your lessons. Instead of a worksheet with 20 identical addition problems, which is blocked practice,
Right.
a well-designed game might interleave addition, subtraction, and simple multiplication in different narrative scenarios, forcing the child to choose the right strategy for each unique challenge.
Making them think more flexibly.
Exactly.
Right.
And crucially, the game's instant feedback, a correct message, a visual cue of an incorrect answer, or a level progression helps elementary students self-correct very quickly, preventing misconceptions from solidifying.
So they learn from mistakes faster.
Right. They learn by doing and immediately seeing the logical consequences of their actions, which is incredibly powerful for their developing cognitive processes. It's like having a personalized tutor built right into the learning activity.
Okay, that covers the cognitive side. What about feelings and motivation?
Great question. Lastly, let's talk about engagement, motivation, and self-efficacy. These are often cited as the primary, most obvious affordances of educational games, and for excellent reasons.
The fun factor, but deeper.
Exactly. Games are intrinsically engaging. They tap into our natural human drives for challenge, mastery, curiosity, and fantasy. They can spark genuine, deep interest in STEM concepts and even inspire students to consider STEM careers.
So they can actually boost interest in STEM.
Our sources highlight numerous studies showing games building sustained interest in complex subjects like genetics and advanced mathematics, transforming perceived difficulty into exciting challenges.
And self-efficacy, that confidence piece.
Critically, games are powerful builders of self-efficacy, that belief in one's own capability to succeed. They achieve this by providing consistent early successes, often through carefully designed onboarding and tutorial levels.
Starting easy.
Right. And then slowly, almost imperceptibly, increasing the difficulty of the tasks. This gradual, scaffolded challenge helps students gain confidence in their abilities, proving to themselves, I can do this, even when faced with something initially daunting.
Building belief through small wins.
Precisely. As students engage, they can also join virtual communities of practice within the game, which helps them build identities as possible scientists or mathematicians. This sense of belonging.
Like we talked about with situated learning.
Exactly. This sense of belonging to a community where these skills are valued and applied further increases their interest in STEM pathways and can even influence their real-world academic and career choices.
That identity piece seems really important.
It really is. For a young child who might initially whisper, math is hard or science isn't for me, a game that provides a gentle introduction, celebrates small successes, and gradually builds on skills can be absolutely transformative.
Turning I can't into I can try.
Exactly. Or even confidently exclaim, I can do this. The idea of being a junior scientist solving cosmic mysteries in a game world or a master builder creating complex structures can genuinely inspire authentic interest in real-world science and math.
Setting them on a path of curiosity and confidence.
Right. Moving them from spectator to active participant, which is critical for long-term engagement.
Okay, that paints a very positive picture. But what are the challenges or limitations?
Good question. So as we look ahead, what does this all mean for the future of game-based learning in STEM? Our sources acknowledge that while the potential is incredibly vast and exciting, the research landscape does present some varying degrees of support.
It's not all perfectly proven yet.
Well, the evidence is strong, but nuanced. While the promise is undeniable, the research is still evolving. Some studies, like one by Girard and colleagues in 2013, found evidence for significant learning outcomes, but not necessarily for increased motivation.
Okay.
Conversely, Boyle and others in 2012 found strong evidence for motivation, but perhaps weaker evidence for direct learning gains compared to traditional methods in some contexts.
So sometimes learning, sometimes motivation, sometimes both. Why the difference?
This divergence often results from a myriad of factors. Different study goals, different learning outcomes being measured, vastly different types of games being studied, and crucially, widely varying implementation strategies of those games in educational settings.
Right. How the teacher actually uses the game matters hugely.
Absolutely. One classroom might integrate a game seamlessly into the curriculum, while another treats it as an isolated Friday afternoon activity. That makes a difference.
So what does future research need to focus on?
To move this field forward, future research needs to address several key needs. First, establishing a common, precise vocabulary for describing games and their design features. What exactly constitutes narrative or adaptive feedback in a measurable way?
Clearer definitions. Makes sense.
Second, we need clear, comprehensive descriptions of how games are actually implemented in studies, how they're introduced by teachers, what accompanying materials are used, and how players are encouraged to reflect on what they've learned.
The context of the implementation. Got it.
Crucially, we need more rigorous studies on the transfer of learning from games to real-world situations.
The million-dollar question. Does it stick outside the game?
Exactly. Can what a student learns about physics in a virtual lab in a game actually apply to designing a real-world ramp for a toy car or understanding a playground swing? This is often the hardest yet most important outcome to measure.
What else?
We also need research that explicitly links specific game design aspects to learning, motivational, affective, and sociocultural outcomes. For instance, what specific design choices are best for boosting self-efficacy versus teaching a specific conceptual idea?
Connecting design features to specific outcomes.
Right. What is the role of accompanying materials and teacher presentation in mediating these outcomes? And perhaps most profoundly, does the identity formation students experience in games seeing themselves as a scientist persist over time and truly influence their future course selection or career choices?
Big questions still to answer.
Definitely. These are foundational questions still waiting for comprehensive answers.
So what does this all mean for you, our future educator, right now? It means there's still so much to learn, so much exciting research to be done.
But the foundation is strong.
Exactly. The empirical foundation for game-based learning in STEM is incredibly strong and compelling. It points to an exciting, dynamic future where play and rigorous, meaningful learning truly intertwines in powerful ways that benefit every child.
So, based on what we do know, Are there some guiding principles?
Yes. And based on the existing robust research and extensive practical experience, our sources propose 4 broad guiding principles for designing and implementing truly successful educational STEM games. These are incredibly practical ideas for you to consider as you step into your future classroom.
Okay, let's hear them. Principle 1.
First, and perhaps most important, connect content to gameplay. This is the primary differentiating factor between true STEM games and mere gamification. The core activity must involve engaging players in STEM practices and activities directly within the game world.
Learning is the game.
Exactly. The play should be inseparable from the understanding of concepts and the practice of skills. If you can remove the learning and the game still works, it's likely gamification.
Got it. Principle 2.
Second, employ unique STEM game connections. Leverage simulations of complex systems, allow for rich explorations of different scales, both spatial and temporal, and facilitate the utilization of authentic disciplinary practices and roles.
Play to the strengths of the medium.
Precisely. This directly leverages what is truly unique about games as a medium for learning. They can do things that textbooks or even traditional labs simply cannot.
Okay. Principle 3.
Third, support learning through scaffolding and narrative. Raw simulations, while powerful, can sometimes be too open-ended and overwhelming for young learners. Games can provide powerful situated learning by offering necessary structures, guiding experiences through clear goals, compelling challenges.
Providing context and purpose.
Yes, and helping players build identity through an engaging narrative. This provides the context, purpose, and adaptive support learners need to navigate complex ideas without feeling lost or frustrated.
Makes sense. And the 4th principle.
And finally, fourth, collect data and provide feedback. Because so much of what players do in well-designed STEM games is built on underlying models and systems, this provides a perfect, often stealth opportunity to collect rich data on player actions, decisions, and progress.
Using the game for assessment.
Exactly. This data can then be used to provide immediate, actionable insights and feedback to both the students themselves, allowing them to monitor their own progress and self-regulate, and crucially, to teachers.
So teachers get insights too.
Yes. Teachers can use this granular data for effective formative assessment, identify specific areas where students might be struggling or excelling, and provide targeted support that is truly data-driven.
Those 4 principles are practical gold for an elementary teacher considering how to use games. They provide a fantastic checklist for evaluating existing educational games, or even for imagining how to integrate playful, investigative activities effectively into your lessons.
They help focus on what matters for learning.
Definitely. They genuinely help you move beyond mere entertainment to genuine, profound, and deeply personalized learning experiences. It's about building a learning environment where children feel both challenged and safe to explore.
Well said.
As we wrap up this deep dive, it's abundantly clear there's immense, still unfolding potential in game-based learning to truly transform STEM education, especially for our youngest learners.
The potential is huge.
By understanding not just that games work, but the profound why and how behind these powerful tools, you can leverage them to ignite curiosity, build unwavering confidence, and foster deep, meaningful learning in your future classrooms.
It's about informed practice.
Imagine the impact you can have when every child sees themselves not just as a learner, but as a capable STEM explorer, an engineer, a scientist, a mathematician.
Indeed. And maybe a final thought. If games can inspire children to spend hours mastering complex systems, embracing new roles, and tirelessly troubleshooting challenges in virtual worlds,
Yeah.
how might we fundamentally rethink the traditional classroom? How can we embrace that same inherent drive for play and mastery, allowing them to truly play their way into a deeper, more personal understanding of the world around them?
That's a powerful question to leave our listeners with, rethinking the classroom itself.
It's a provocative thought that challenges us to bridge the gap between their passion for play and the structured learning environment, making school a place they genuinely want to be.
A truly exciting and inspiring challenge. We encourage you, our listener, to continue exploring the fascinating world of game-based learning and to consider how you might apply these powerful insights in your own teaching journey, making STEM come alive for your students. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.